Hello everyone, and welcome back. After 22 years trapped in the past, Cortex is back, and now he's not just threatening the planet, not just the timeline, but the entire fabric of the universe itself. And of course, when Cortex is scheming, Crash is impeding. But after 22 years out of the world-saving business, Crash is a little out of shape, and I doubt he'd be able to break a box even if he tried, so why even bother? Can you beat Crash Bandicoot 4? It's about time, without breaking any boxes. Crash Bandicoot 4, The Wrath of Cortex, without breaking any boxes. Wait, was that always this game's title? Something doesn't feel right here. The rules of this run are the same as always. Number 1, we're not allowed to break any boxes by any means. That's pretty obvious. If you couldn't figure that out, there's not much I can do to help you. If, or more likely from past experience, when there's a box that's needed to be broken to continue, this will become a minimalist run. Number 2, if an avoidable box is accidentally broken, I must either quit or die to restart the level. Number 3, every main level of the game must be cleared. No skipping levels to avoid boxes. And finally, as always, pity Aku-Akus given for repeated deaths are allowed as long as we don't abuse them to avoid otherwise unavoidable boxes. This is probably the most unsure I've been for how one of these Crash runs will go. I've played way less of this one than the Naughty Dog trilogy, so I don't really have any idea where the problem areas might pop up, and I'm way less familiar with the game's feel to handle them when they do. Plus, this game isn't known for being as high quality as the Naughty Dog trilogy. Sorry Wrath of Cortex fans, but there's a reason it was the Insane trilogy and not the Insane quadrilogy. This could lead to more exploits for getting around boxes, but honestly, I think this sloppy nature is more likely to impede box avoidance. In any case, we won't know until we give it a go. So, can you beat Crash Bandicoot 4 without breaking any boxes? Before getting into that, I have a long overdue update for my Crash 3 video. On that video, viewer this name informed me that in Under Pressure you're able to get out of bounds, theoretically letting us skip a good handful of boxes. By swimming between these boxes and the roof of the tube, you can eventually get pushed in front of the boxes and then fall underneath the tube, from where you'll be able to navigate around the place off screen. If you know your way around, you can actually navigate all the way to the end of the level, but I couldn't figure out how to do that. While this is cool, unfortunately it doesn't help much, since as far as I know the only place to perform this glitch in this level is after all the boxes that are needed to be broken to progress. Still though, I'm glad I learned about this. It's always fun to find new ways to break some of my favourite games. But with that said, let's get back on with the video at hand. Just like Crash 2 and 3 before it, we start off in a warp room. This time, the warp room feels basically like a direct copy-paste job from Crash 3, like they didn't even try at all to make this thing feel original. It's here that Cortex appears in front of Crash to explain his plan for world domination. He might be our arch-enemy, but it would be simply rude to leave us out of the loop. He and Uka Uka have released 4 imprisoned masks, known as the Elementals, so cool because each represents a different one of the 4 elements: solid, liquid, plasma, and gas. These things are responsible for causing all sorts of havoc on the ancient world, so we've got to steal them away with the power crystals QuickSmart. These guys aren't the only new allies Cortex has managed to scrape up though, as he introduces us to his new creation, Crunch Bandicoot, aka Sigma Crash. This guy's the perfected version of everything that Crash was gonna be, so it's definitely gonna be an uphill battle against this dude. Anyway, with that done, we have one section of the warp room unlocked and 5 levels available to us, so let's get into it. First up, level 1, Arctic Antics. This level is a fairly standard Crash platforming affair, which is what you want out of a first level, though I do have to say it feels kind of weird that it's an ice level to start with. This gives us the perfect opportunity to get a hang of the controls. It's basically identical to Crash 3. Move, jump, slide, spin. If you played Crash 3, this will feel very familiar to you, though unfortunately it seems Crash has forgotten all the moves that he got for defeating bosses in that game, so no double jump or detonator spins for now. While it does feel familiar to Crash 3, I do have to say it does feel slightly off, and I don't really know how to put it into words. Everything just feels slightly sluggish to control. This could be because I'm coming off the remake versions of the Crash trilogy, or the fact that I'm using a very cheap unofficial controller, or even just my childhood PS2 Slim starting to show its age, but still I thought it was worth mentioning. It's not like game-breakingly bad to control or anything, it just took me a hot second to get the feel for it. As for box avoidance itself in this level, there's not much to say really. Most of the boxes here know what's best for them and decide to stay out of our way, so we move on with the grand total of 0 boxes. On to level 2, Tornado Alley. 2 levels in and we've already got our first gimmick level, this one being a flying level like Bye Bye Blimps or Mad Bombers from Crash 3. I already wasn't a massive fan of these in Crash 3 thanks to their drastic shift from the standard gameplay, and just not really being a fan of aerial combat games, and that was a dislike that continued on into this game. Luckily, while I might not find this level fun, it's also insanely easy. You have to go out of your way to shoot down any boxes, and none of the enemy pilots really care to bother us all that much, so in no time this is another one added to the boxes pile. Next up, level 3, Bamboozled, another gimmick level. Get used to hearing that a lot because there are a lot of them in this game. This time it's a unique gimmick for Crash 4, not copied from any of the other games. Crash is trapped in this ball, and instead of running around the stage, we have to roll. It's basically just Monkey Ball as a platformer, And seeing as I'm not a big fan of Monkey Ball, yeah, I really don't care for these levels. This thing is so hard to control. It gains speed super quickly, it takes ages to slow down, and sometimes it just seems to have a mind of its own, doing whatever the hell it wants to do, regardless of my movements, and that's just for a standard playthrough. Trying to do this boxless is an absolute nightmare, thanks to the combination of annoying movements and extremely precise platforming around narrow spaces. This makes pretty much every single box in the entire course its own challenge, and even one slip up will have you rolling your ass all the way back to square one. It would take too long to show every single hard spot in this level, so I'll just walk you through the first few boxes to give you an idea of what you're in for. Straight out the gate, two boxes sit dead center in the middle of the path. Trying to get around them on the side with the safety rail won't work since there's not enough space, so you'll have to do a death-defying leap across this corner to avoid them. Careful though, as if you have too much speed, you'll end up likely uncontrollably hurtling into the box further down the path. This alone is going to be the end to 95% of your runs, and even after making this leap successfully dozens of times, it was always a gamble to replicate it. Not long after this, there's an elevator taking us up higher in the level, but to get there we need to get past 4 more boxes blocking our path, and again, passing on the side with the safety rail is just plain out of the question. Instead, you'll have to perform a tightrope walk along the unguarded side with a single centimeter in either direction, resulting in a failed run. Luckily, the next box is a cinch. It's one of those boxes that flickers between a life, a question mark, and nothing, and by leaving it long enough, eventually it'll turn into a metal crate, becoming unbreakable regardless of if we hit it or not. We then have another tightrope walk, but this time the box is only 1 wide in the path, so there's a lot more leeway here. And then, we enter the half pipe. These things are easily the worst part of this level. They're littered with boxes, and if you don't know that they're coming up, heck, even if you do, it's super easy to lose control and slam into them. The only way I found to even slightly effectively avoid boxes here was to move in such a way that Crash defies gravity and stays up on the raised edge of the half pipe, then slowly creep my way along the wall until I pass the boxes. The rest of the level is just more of this over and over and over again, and the chances of making it through to the end without slipping up and smashing a box is near impossible. In fact, straight up, I couldn't do it. The fewest boxes I was able to make it to the end with was 3. I just couldn't get the perfect run. Despite this though, every single box in the level is avoidable. I got past each one just fine at least once, so I don't really feel like it's fair to call this challenge failed since it clearly can be done if you're better than me. You might think that I should classify these as ghost boxes as I've done in my previous runs, but that's specifically a designation for boxes that the game breaks itself, so that really doesn't fit either. Instead, I'm going to label these with a completely new designation of theoretical boxes, for boxes that are 100% avoidable but that due to my lack of skill, I was unable to get by. With that said, we can leave bamboozled with 3 theoretical boxes added to our total. Moving along to level 4, Wizards and Lizards. We're back to standard Crash platforming affair, and not only that, but it's a return to the chase levels from the previous Crash games featuring the titular lizard. It was this level that had me make a pretty annoying discovery. Just before the chase path, I decided to jump on the bonus room platform since in my previous runs we could essentially use these as a pseudo checkpoint with any death later in the level spawning us back here instead of the very beginning. This was useful since the only other way to get a checkpoint is to break open a checkpoint box, which obviously we can't do. This time though, the bonus rooms have been extremely nerfed. They still act as a checkpoint, but only for any death sustained within the room. If you die on the main path, it's still a total restart, making them completely useless, and meaning now our only option is to complete every level from the start on a single life. The chase path itself was pretty easy. It took me a few deaths to learn where everything was, but once I did, I was avoiding boxes like it was nobody's business. If you're familiar with these runs though, you'll know that even if we can avoid all the boxes here, it doesn't matter, as they'll get mulched by the bull, bear, dino, or dragon chasing us, and despite their death not being our fault, they still get added to our total. Since this is the game breaking its own boxes, I count these as ghost boxes rather than full-fledged box breakages. Still though, I like to keep ghost boxes to a minimum, and this path features a lot of them, somewhere between 41 and 49. Yeah, I don't actually know exactly how many boxes destroyed on this path, since I got a little bit of variance between my attempts. Sometimes it was as low as 41, on my successful attempt at the level it was 47, and my head count of the number of boxes physically on the path was 49. To keep things simple, I'm gonna just go with my successful attempt and add 47 ghost boxes to the total. We're not done with this level yet though, as there's still a little section left, and while most of the boxes here can be weaved through with some good jumping, this stack of 3 here can't be jumped over or navigated past, leaving us no other option than to break one of the boxes, lowering the stack so that we can jump over. Since this is us breaking a completely unavoidable box, this one does count as a full box broken, meaning that no, it's not possible to beat Crash Bandicoot 4 without breaking any boxes. Big shocker, I know. Yeah, this was bound to happen eventually. I basically just go into these runs with a minimalist challenge in mind now. There's one more difficult spot where we have to get past 2 of these wizards without getting hit by their homing magic and get over a pile of nitros behind them, but with some good platforming this is doable, meaning we leave level 4 with a total of 1 box and 47 ghost boxes broken. Level 5, Compactor Reactor is up next, and it's another new gimmick level, and this one I actually kinda like, having Crash riding around on a minecart along a track. Once you learn where all the boxes are, it's pretty easy to lean Crash in the correct way to avoid all of them, at least just until the end of the track. Here there's a box on either side, a nitros and a question mark. If you go through without leaning at all, you'll clip the nitro box, which unless you've got a pity Aku isn't an option, meaning that our only choice here is to lean into and break the question mark box. The end of the minecart track isn't the end of the level though, as it spits us out into a regular platforming stage to finish up with. This is something that Crash 4 does a lot, having levels that start off or end with a gimmick and have the rest be standard platforming, and it's an idea that I like a lot. As for the stage itself, it's pretty easy. There are a few slightly challenging jumps, but nothing too bad. Even this staircase of boxes can be climbed, since the bottom two boxes are bouncing boxes that need to be jumped on multiple times to break. So imagine my surprise when I reached the end of the level and was told that I had apparently broken another box somewhere along the way. Figuring I just accidentally hit something, I replayed the level being extra careful, but nope, still this mystery box was there. I knew I hadn't screwed up on the minecart track since I'd been checking my total through the platforming stage, and it had remained at 1 the entire time. After a little bit of testing, I figured out that it was happening somewhere around this jump here, but where I wasn't doing anything wrong. I hit the switch crate, jumped over the TNT, and I hit the switch crate. No, it couldn't be that. That would just be too stupid to even consider. You've gotta be kidding me. Why would they make switch crates count towards the box total? Not only does it go against the precedent that the previous game set, but it just flat out doesn't make sense. Hitting a switch crate just turns it into a metal crate. It doesn't break it. I can still see it sitting right there. In fact, no, you know what? I flat out refuse to count this box. There's no rule that says that the box total determines the number of boxes broken, and no matter what you try and tell me, this crate isn't broken. So I'm making the executive decision that despite what the game might say, switch boxes don't count towards our total. I'll still try and avoid them where I can, but hitting them won't add a box to the counter. With that being said, this level still requires a broken box, bringing us to 2 boxes and 47 ghost boxes total. With the first 5 levels completed, we now have to take on our first boss. Something I'm kinda torn about in this game is that every boss fight is just Crunch being powered up by a different one of the elemental masks. This gets dogged on a lot, but I think the idea has some merit, making Crunch feel like a real rival for Crash. In practice though, it's pretty lame. Each of the last games gave us a whole host of new, unique and interesting villains, along with a handful of returning cast members coming back with a vengeance, so having just one new face is incredibly lame. I guess each of the different masks kind of fills the void of character, but let's be real here, are these planks of wood anywhere near as cool and memorable as Dingo Dial, Tiny Tiger or Ripperoo? Maybe it would help a little if the fights were fun, but for the most part they range from passable to pretty bad. This first one in particular sucks, since we have to do it in the damn Crash Ball. We have to roll around bumping into boulders, and after we hit enough of them, they'll zoom off to damage Crunch. Because of the awful movement in this thing, hitting boulders is a matter of luck, not skill, plus it can drag on for ages, since any boulders that we convert to our side get neutralized if Crunch hits them. You can also hit neutral boulders to set them on fire, meaning we have to waste even more time for them to extinguish, or hitting them will damage us. It took me ages and really wasn't fun, but since there's no boxes involved, victory is a foregone conclusion. For beating Crunch here, we get our first power-up, and it's a new original one for Crash 4, the Sneak Shoes, and this is probably the most useless power-up in the entire series, letting us tiptoe across specific lines of nitro boxes without making them explode. This is used so few times in the game that it makes me wonder why they even wasted their time to code it in. Like, I don't even have any footage of me using it since it just never came up in my playthrough. With that done, we now have a new warp room to check out, so on to level 6, Jungle Rumble. The opening platforming segment is completely uneventful, nothing here poses any challenge at all. It's the second half of the level that poses problematic for this run. It's a chase segment, this time against a horde of rhinos and having Crash driving around in a jeep. As always, ghost boxes galore on the track, but uniquely for the chase segments, there's actually a few boxes that we can't avoid hitting ourselves. There are a few ramps with boxes on them next to pits which you might think are unavoidable, but you can actually carefully skirt over the pits to negate the ramps entirely. Jumping off this ramp though is required, and no matter where you jump from, there's a box in your way, with only one that we can actually hit since the rest are nitros. When the path splits away from the rhinos briefly, you should stick to Crash's left to avoid all of the boxes in the tunnel. When the path narrows, we're forced to once again choose between breaking a nitro or a regular box, which sucks, but it's a pretty obvious choice. This narrow segment in general is pretty hard to navigate with all the nitros around every corner, so even in a standard playthrough it can be quite hard to get through here, but for our purposes there's also another unavoidable box. Well, these boxes would have been destroyed regardless of our intervention. Since we are still the ones to break them, I can't in good conscience call these ghost boxes. The final total is 33 boxes broken, 30 ghost and 3 normal, meaning we move on with a total of 5 boxes and 77 ghost boxes broken. Yikes, that's a lot of phantoms. Next up is level 7 Seashell Shenanigans. This is an underwater level, a type of level I already wasn't massive on in Crash 3, but in this game they're way worse, and it really comes down to one factor: the mines. These things will activate when we get close enough, dropping down to try and take us out. They come out of nowhere and are oftentimes mostly or even entirely obscured behind bits of scenery, meaning that you have to know where they are to avoid them. Heck, even if you know they're there, due to how long it takes to stop once you're moving, if you're slightly careless, you'll be unable to correct in time to avoid these things. Aside from that, there's also even more unavoidable boxes in this one, and this time it's not just a small handful. To start off with, despite looking like we can squeeze past it, this box in the first tube is fully blocking the path, so it's gotta go, and in the next tube we're faced with a similar situation, once again requiring a single box to be broken. Right after this, the path is once again blocked, only this time not by a single box. We have to explode a stack of boxes to lower a wall of metal crates. I at first thought that this added another 5 boxes to our total, but if you take a close look, there's actually another nitro buried just barely visible underground. Heading into the next tunnel, Crash jumps into a sub, just like in Crash 3, only this time it's not an optional power-up, it doesn't provide an extra hit before death, and it makes our hitbox way bigger, thus making it harder to avoid boxes, so just all around worse. In the next tunnel, there's a row of 5 nitros blocking the path that we need to blow up with a bomb from the sub. If this level ended right now, it would already be a pretty costly one at 13 boxes broken, but we're still not done yet, as there's another wall of metal boxes that need to be lowered by exploding some nitros, like a lot of nitros. I think you're meant to shoot these 2 boxes here so you can bomb the nitro to start the chain of explosions, but with a perfectly aimed bomb to the left of the boxes, we can avoid breaking them. Not that it really matters, since to lower this wall, 13 more boxes need to be broken, bringing us to a total of 26 boxes broken in this level, the most costly level for box breakages in any of these runs so far. I think any chance of this run being the new champion of Crash boxless challenges is utterly out the window now with this level, but regardless, the show must go on, bringing our total to 77 ghost boxes and 31 boxes broken. Level 8, Banzai Bonsai is next. At first, this one seems promising, since it's the first level that we get to play as Coco. In my previous Crash runs, I made it clear that playing as Coco was my preferred way to play a Crash game, which is why it brings me no joy to say that Coco in this game straight up sucks. Unlike in the Insane trilogy, where she's basically just a copy-paste job of Crash with the fabulousness turned up to 11, here she has an ever so slightly different moveset, which would be cool if it wasn't just a straight downgrade of Crash's moveset. She can't slide, which means no slide jump, she has this weird ankle swipe kick attack that feels awful to use, stopping you in her tracks as it slowly comes out, and worst of all, she can't use any of Crash's power-ups, which means in her later levels, no double jump. While I appreciate the idea here of making Coco her own thing, they really did my girl dirty, and I kinda wish that they had just made her a carbon copy of Crash, honestly. As for the level itself, it's not terrible. Sure, Coco's moveset feels worse to use, but her levels are designed around it to alleviate that a little. We start out promising with no boxes really posing a challenge to avoid, but around halfway through we find this stack that's too high to jump over. Despite it looking like we can just walk around it, for whatever reason we can't, so we have to jump off the top box of the first column to bounce over the rest of the stack. This box here I thought I'd have to do an awkward jump over to land on the other side, but turns out that we do have enough space to narrowly squeeze past it. The same goes for this stack that looks unavoidable, as we can squeeze past it with no trouble, but then the next box for whatever reason we can't. It might look like we don't need to squeeze past it since we can just jump over it, but because of the little bit of roof here, we actually don't have enough space to do that, forcing us to break another box. On this jumping platform, the box hanging in the air can be a little daunting to get under, but with proper timing it is doable. This stack here I thought might need to be broken since the low roof would make it impossible to jump over, but we can kinda jump around it to get past. The stack after this though is a different story. Jumping over these will cause Coco to bonk off the roof and crash through both of them, and this time there's no way around breaking them. Luckily that's it for this level though. Sure, 4 boxes broken isn't great, but after seashell shenanigans this is a barely noticeable blip on the box total, bringing us to 35 boxes broken. Next is level 9, that sinking feeling. This is another flying level, so I was hoping that just like Tornado Alley it would be a cinch, but turns out it's actually pretty frustrating. Whereas in the previous flying level enemies felt like they couldn't care less about us, here they're super aggressive, and there's a whole lot more of them, making it hard to avoid taking damage while also trying to shoot our targets. Speaking of shooting our targets, this time instead of a machine gun we're armed with homing rockets that take a second to lock on before they can shoot. This is functional, but it makes it take a lot longer to actually destroy anything. Despite all of this though, from a box avoidance perspective, the level is no harder than the last flying level. You really have to go out of your way to hit them, making this one the first boxless clear in a while. Level 10, H2O No Just Add Water is next, and Oh No is right since it's another swimming level, this time starting off in the sub. Surprisingly though, the underwater segment isn't the hard part of this level, despite it still suffering from all the same problems as the last one. For the most part, boxes here are relatively easy to maneuver past, with only 2 being completely necessary to destroy to get through. The real pain comes, surprisingly, when Crash leaves the water and the on-foot segment of the level begins. This segment features a bunch of precise platforming over these acid pools using single boxes as platforms to get across. For the most part, these boxes are metal crates, so they're fine to jump on, but the first 2 aren't, meaning that we have to break them to get by. Even for the metal crates, they all have regular boxes attached to them, meaning that if your jump isn't absolutely perfect, even if you land it, you can still easily mess up and break one of these boxes, forcing a restart. It was super frustrating to get through the already vaguely annoying swimming segment just for my run to be immediately killed by these jumps, but eventually I was able to get the perfect run. A perfect run that still breaks 4 boxes though, bringing us to 39 boxes and 77 ghosts. We now have our second boss fight with Crunch, this time being powered up by Wawa, the water elemental. This fight is better than the last, but still not great, kinda playing like a lamer version of Entropy from Crash 3. We have to jump across platforms towards Crunch, timing our jumps to dodge between his attacks to give him the spin. Once you know the pattern of his attacks, it's not hard to dodge them all to get over to him and and take him out. Our reward for beating him this time is the double jump, a much more fitting and useful reward than the damn sneak shoes. Another boss down, another warp room unlocked, so it's on to level 11, the Gauntlet. That name worried me a little bit, but as it turns out, this one isn't as bad as some of the previous levels, probably because we now have the double jump, which makes box avoidance as well as just general platforming way easier. We can put the double jump to good use right out the gate, letting us get across this gap without activating the switch crate in process to them now counting towards the box tally. Yeah, I'm still pissed about that. Other than that, this level is kind of a breeze. The double jump makes it super easy to skip past any boxes that would have posed a challenge before. Even this part here that looks daunting can be easily overcome with some perfect jumping. Heck, even with imperfect jumping, this can happen. Not sure how I managed this, but it saved me a reset and let me finish out the level boxless, so I ain't complaining. Level 12 Tsunami is a Coco level, and as I mentioned earlier, Coco can't use Crash's power-ups, which means unfortunately no double jump to rely on this time. Luckily though, its presence isn't missed too much, as the opening on foot segment doesn't feature much in the way of difficult platforming or hard to avoid boxes. Once that's through though, we get another chase segment, this time scooting away from the titular Tsunami. I found it quite difficult to avoid all of the boxes here while also surviving to the end, but once you know their layout, it's not impossible. I thought the first box right after jumping onto the scoot might be unavoidable, but by holding the jump button before Coco starts moving, she can jump over it easily. Even with perfect box evasion though, as always with the chase levels, the chaser claims the lives of many innocent boxes, with 21 ghost boxes being taken out, updating our total to 98 ghost boxes broken. On to level 13, Smokey and the Bandicoot, which is the return of the racing levels from Crash 3, with the fun new twist of being terrible. Yeah, I really don't like this one. The way this Jeep bounces and bubbles around feels horrible, and don't get me started on the turning. We're driving in the desert, not on the ice, so why is it so slidey? Plus, the camera here is terrible. The way it follows Crash means that oftentimes when you're turning, you can't see the road ahead of you. Even a standard playthrough just trying to get to the end in first place to get the crystal is super annoying, but add in trying to avoid every single box on the road, and oh my god, this is infuriating. Even knowing where every box is and how to avoid them, without the perfectest of perfect executions, you'll either hit a box and need to restart, or worse, get all the way to the end boxless and come in second. Starting off the race, you immediately want to get to the right of the road to try and pass the first car on its right before the second set of boxes. You'll then immediately want to move back towards the middle left to avoid said boxes and pass by the next set. Getting up on this ramp is a real pain, as the other races are removable objects, and bumping into them will often send you plummeting into the pit here, but you don't really have the time to slow down and wait your turn, so try and push your way in as best as you can. The next little segment, you'll want to try your hardest to get into second place, while still being aware of all the boxes. At minimum, you'll want to be in second place by the time you get to this point here, since you'll need to slow down in order to thread the needle between these boxes and the pit, which, if you don't have a good lead on the other cars, can lead to you getting overtaken by a lot. You can also take this corner wide and skirt straight over the pit, but I found this is a little inconsistent to really be worth risking. The race with the red car in first is the hardest, and trying to get around them can drag on quite a while. Even in my successful run where I managed to get an early lead, I was soon overtaken due to having to drive up onto the side of the road to avoid this box here. Then I almost ruined this entire run by oversteering to try to get back onto the track and ended up almost clipping this box on the ramp. From here we really don't have that much time to get back into first place, but while I was taking this corner I managed to skirt over this bit here, giving me a great chance to overtake and finish out the race in first. Holy hell, you don't know how good it felt to finally be done with this level. I was honestly starting to get ready to just say screw it and finish the level as best as I could and add some more theoretical boxes to my total like I did in Bamboozled, but I'm glad that I can now definitely say that this one is doable boxless. Hopefully the next level isn't nearly as frustrating as this one. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Yep, level 14, Eskimo Roll, is another Crash Ball level, just like Bamboozled. This one doesn't have any half-pipe segments, and a lot of the time the path is a lot wider, so it could be argued that this level is slightly easier than Bamboozled, but still, after what I just went through with the last level, this is the last thing I wanted to be doing. This time, there are some boxes that we can't get around. Right out the gate, this one leading onto the bridge can't be worked around, so it needs to go. There are probably a few ways to get through this next area, but the best I found was to move over to the left wall, and as long as you stick to it and move forward, you shouldn't fall into any of the pits. Not long after this, we get to see where all of Crash's classic villains have been hanging out instead of being this game's bosses. Yeah, for whatever reason, in this level and some of the other Crash Ball levels, Tiny, Entropy, and Dingodile appear as just standard obstacles. I'm guessing this was done to appease old Crash fans who would have been disappointed if these characters didn't appear at all, but with how pathetic of obstacles they are, this is just insulting. This isn't Tiny Tiger, this is like Minuscule Tiger or something. At least it's cool that Dingodile learned to teleport between games, that's a fun bit of lore, I guess. This is probably the hardest move in this level. It looks like we have a lot of room to get past, but since most of the space slopes off towards the edge, it's actually a lot more precise than it seems, and this one area will probably kill most of your runs. At this point here, there is enough space to get past this box on the left, but due to the obscured view, I struggled to get by without tapping it. Plus, there's a hidden nitro here that's really easy to bump into by mistake, so I found it was safer to just pass by using the wall, being careful not to fall over the edge. For the next little bit, none of the boxes are too awfully hard to avoid, just go slow and take the path of least resistance. Here I thought that I had no choice but to break through this box to get by, but on my successful run of the level, I managed to sneak past past it without falling into the pit, which is great. I had resigned myself to breaking this one, honestly. Though there's still another box that does need to be broken in this level here. You might be able to sort of run up this wall to get around it, but if that's possible, I couldn't manage it. There are a few more hard to avoid boxes in this level, but it's pretty obvious how to get by them. It's just the execution that's the trouble, meaning we can finish this level with 2 boxes added to our total. Yeah, okay, I know it says 3. On my successful attempt, I got careless and hit a really easy to avoid box without noticing, but at this point, for this play session alone, I'd been playing this level for 2 hours, and even now, the thought of playing it for a second more fills me with dread. Here's a clip of me easily avoiding this box. It's clearly avoidable. We're moving on with 41 boxes, 98 ghost boxes, and I guess 4 theoretical boxes now. Next is level 15, Celsius Insanity. What do you mean that's not this level title? Well, tell you what, maybe when your country learns how to elect a competent leader, I'll respect your units of measurement. This level starts out with a jetpack stage, returning from all the way back in Crash 2. I've heard these levels get a lot of flack from the fandom, but I couldn't disagree more. I've always loved them, and this one is no exception, especially since getting around all the boxes here is an absolute breeze. Unfortunately, it doesn't last long, and soon we're chucked into a normal platforming level. This part isn't too bad for the most part either, but unfortunately there is a mandatory box towards the end. This stack here probably would have required a box to be broken to get by before, but once again the double jump comes in clutch, letting us fly over the whole thing no problem, and no other box proves a challenge, meaning finishing this level brings us to a total of 42 boxes and 98 ghost boxes broken. With another 5 levels down, we have another crunch fight to contest with, and you know what? This one's okay. We have to run away from Crunch as he rolls boulders at us, and at the end of the path, Crash jumps into a mech suit, turning the tables on Crunch, chasing him back up the path to deal some damage. Rinse and repeat 3 times with each cycle, increasing the distance we have to run and giving Crunch some new moves to work with. It isn't a great fight, but compared to the last few bosses, I'd take this one any day. For beating Crunch here, we get awarded the Detonator Spin, which is probably the second best power-up in the game, letting us massively increase our hang time in the air, which, if it's anything like Crash 3, can be absolutely game-breaking. Unfortunately, we don't get a chance to try it out just yet, as level 16, Avalanche, is a Coco level. Just like the last Coco level, this one starts out with a regular platforming stage and finishes up with a chase, this time skiing away from a massive avalanche. I found this chase a lot easier to get through without breaking any boxes than the last. I feel like it does a much better job signposting their positions to help you navigate towards, or in our case, away from them. Of course though, as always with chase levels, comes unavoidable ghost boxes, and this time there's 27 of them. Nothing we can really do about that. There was a box on the platforming path though that I was really torn about. This stack on the bridge would be a breeze to jump over with Crash's double jump, but without it, Coco really struggles, and I thought it was impossible to get over without landing on and breaking the top one. To my surprise though, on one attempt I actually managed to get over it, so clearly it is avoidable. The problem was I was never able to replicate this on any future attempts. If I had finished the run without breaking it, I would have been happy to call it an avoidable box, and if I could have at least replicated this a good handful of times, maybe I would have called it a theoretical box, but seeing as it seems to have just been a random, unreplicatable glitch, I feel like I should still call this a box that's required to break, meaning our total is updated to 43 boxes and 125 ghost boxes. Yikes, triple digits. That's a first for these runs. That's really not good. On to level 17, Droid Void. This level is a return of the monkey bars from Crash 2 and 3, and oh my god, what a downgrade. Crash moves so slow on these, it's actually painful. This is already a really long level, and having to slog your way through this at the beginning of every attempt just makes it drag out all the more. I also have a special beef with this section where the monkey bars periodically get electrified. I assume that there's some kind of sound effect to help you know when you need to switch from the top monkey bars to the ground, but because of the way I'm recording footage for this video, all audio is muted during gameplay, meaning for any sections with these sound-based cues, I'm basically flying blind. I know this isn't the game's fault, but this caused me to die way more than I should have, not just in this segment, but throughout the entire game, and I just needed to vent about it. Just after this part, we come across that mech suit that Crash used in the last boss fight, and now we get to use it in an actual level. While in theory this is cool, giving us a ranged attack similar to the Fruit Bazooka from Crash 3, it's more of a downside, since it limits Crash's moveset, makes him a bigger target, and doesn't give him an extra hit or anything like that. Despite all of this, for the most part, box avoidance in this section is pretty easy. The only parts that really cause any challenge are getting over the various box walls with scientists attacking from behind. Especially this one with nitros blocking the path is extremely nerve-wracking, but once you know what you're doing, it's pretty easy to get past. The main problem with this level isn't any difficult platforming, but rather, as I mentioned, it's insanely long. It just goes on and on and on. Every time I turned a corner expecting to see the exit portal, the level just continued stretching out. Even if none of the challenges are all that, well, challenging, with how long it takes, it becomes hard to not slip up at some point. And remember, we have to do this all on one life, since the bonus platforms don't act as checkpoints anymore. I was starting to think that despite this level's frustrating length, at least it was going to be boxless, but as if to spite me, right near the end we start to get some unavoidable boxes. If we were just playing a standard Crash, a lot of these might be avoidable thanks to the double jump or detonator spin, but thanks to this mecha's lackluster movement skills, we're forced to break 8 more boxes, bringing us to a total of 51 boxes and 125 ghosts. Next up, level 15, Crash Droids, is another flying level, weirdly named after Crash, despite us playing as Coco for this one. I've mentioned that I'm not a big fan of these flying levels in Crash, especially in this game, but you know what, I don't actually mind this one. It still has a lot of the same issues as that sinking feeling, with a lot of aggressive enemies with a tendency to crash into us out of nowhere, but I don't know, maybe the space theming is cool enough to make my brain ignore these problems. Although being in the void of space does add its own annoyances, making it a lot easier to get disorientated and lose where your targets are. Box avoidance is also just as easy as in the last flying levels, making it go by super quick, which is probably another reason I enjoyed this one after the gauntlet that was the last level. Level 19, Coral Canyon, is another underwater level, and unlike the last one, it's entirely underwater. Given how bad the last fully underwater level was for the box counter and just the playthrough in general, this one filled me with dread, but actually it's not too bad on either front. Thanks to the abundance of vertical space in the subsection, you can go straight over most of the obstacles, and as long as you take it slow, you shouldn't get beamed out of nowhere by a mine or a rogue fish. The swimming section does have some pretty tight gaps to squeeze through around nitros, but honestly it's not all that hard once you know what you're doing. As for boxes, there aren't any massive walls blocking our path that we need to annihilate this time, just one small stack that only requires 2 boxes to be broken to continue. I'm actually kind of pleasantly surprised with this one. Don't get me wrong, it's not a good level and it does still have mandatory boxes, but that's really to be expected at this point. We move on with 53 boxes and 125 ghost boxes broken. On to level 20, Weathering Heights. I really don't have much to say about this one, it's a pretty straightforward level. We do get our first real use of the Death Tornado spin, letting us skip over this platform with a TNT we would otherwise have to set off, which is cool. There is a mandatory box that we have to break here since the roof is too low to jump over and Crash just refuses to walk past it, but that's the only one, bringing our total to 54 boxes broken. Another warp room done, another boss to fight, this time being a sendback to the fight against Engine from Crash 3, with the added twist of sucking. Yeah, it would have been hard to ever make a fight that matched how cool the Engine battle was, but this is almost an insult to that fight. Our attacks do barely anything to crunch his health bar, already meaning that it takes ages to bring him down. Plus, the only spot that we can actually damage him is wherever Lolo, his elemental masked buddy for this fight, is located, and that spot tends to be the spot that's hardest to get into position to hit while he's attacking us, slowing down how fast we drain his health even further. Yeah, I feel like if they had just bumped up our damage for this fight, it could have been at least fun, but as it stands, it's almost as bad as the first Crash Ball boss. For beating Crunch here, we get awarded the Fruit Bazooka, which isn't very useful for us in this run, but at least it's cooler than the Sneak Shoes. We're now into the end game, just 5 more power crystals left till we can seal away the elementals and put a stop to Cortex's plan. Level 21, Crash and Burn. This might just be my favourite level in the entire game, and it really goes to show that maybe they should have just focused on a core of good platforming levels rather than throwing gimmicks in everywhere. Something cool I noticed, and this could just be a coincidence, but this almost feels like a reimagining of Insanity Beach from Crash 1, especially this opening segment. Getting to re-explore this classic location, or at the very least a similar one, is super cool, especially now in the much more tense fashion of being in the grips of a natural disaster. It's also a very easy boxes level, with no boxes really getting in our way at all. This jerk bird does decide to break a box for us, but I don't think one more ghost box is really even going to be noticeable in the grand scheme of things. We finish off Crash and Burn with 54 boxes and 126 ghost boxes. Level 22, Gold Rush, is another fun, almost completely standard Crash platforming level, though this one is slightly worse than Crash and Burn thanks to a return of those slow-ass monkey bar segments. Still though, 2 of these in a row is a real miracle. It's like one of the devs had a Jimmy Neutron brain blast and realized that should add a little more of the gameplay Crash is known for into the Crash game they were making. Though apparently whoever on the team was insisting they added a new vehicle for Crash to ride around in every 5 minutes managed to wrangle control of the dev PC back long enough to add this brief segment where Crash rides around in one of these. Actually, I don't know what these things are called. I've only ever seen them in like Western movies. All you need to do here is spam X to move along the track. There are no obstacles, you can't jump, it's a completely boring and pointless segment. But of course, on top of being pointless, the track is littered with boxes, and since we are locked in with no way around them, we have no choice but to slam into them, adding 9 more boxes to our total. That's not the end of it for this level though, as this row of boxes on the monkey bars blocks our path, so to get by, we need to break one. There are a few nerve-wracking box blockades that I thought might require some breakages, but both can actually be gotten around relatively easily, with a well-aimed slide Death Tornado spin, and by aiming a jump perfectly to only land on this bouncing box, meaning that we can finish up Gold Rush with 64 boxes and 126 ghost boxes broken. Level 23, Medieval Madness, is a... no. Oh god, no, why? I was just starting to get into this game with fun platforming levels and they had to ruin it by adding a bloody Crash Ball level. From a box avoidance perspective, this one isn't as bad, as most of the areas have pretty well spaced out boxes, but to make up for being slightly better on that front, they completely tank it in the level design, having a bunch of slopes to roll up and down and side to side on, which just doesn't feel good with how easily this thing falls out of our control. The level's also very expansive, with multiple paths making it feel almost maze-like. In fact, at the end, there's a straight up maze we have to navigate. Also, despite me mentioning that box avoidance in this level was much better than in the previous levels, levels, there are still 2 sections where boxes are needed to be broken, and they add up to more boxes than in any of the previous rolling levels combined. This row here completely blocks our path, so long boxes, and in the half pipe at the end, despite thinking I could use the same trick from Bamboozled of getting up on the edge of the pipe to avoid these boxes, it didn't seem to work here. I think because the pipe is a lot thinner here. These are the only boxes that are required to be broken, but this one here at the start and these 2 in this section are technically avoidable, but are extremely hard to, and on my successful attempt, I could only get by the last one. 12 boxes are broken at the end, only 10 of which are completely unavoidable, meaning our total is up to 74 boxes and 6 theoretical boxes. Next we have level 24, Crate Balls of Fire, and it's a return of the slow-ass monkey bar sections. Luckily, they make a much more minor appearance here. Early on, we are unfortunately forced to break this Aku Aku box while jumping between platforms, but out of all the boxes to be forced to be broken in a level, this is one of the more useful ones, only really being outdone by a checkpoint. The gap between these 2 boxes isn't big enough for Crash to get through without breaking 1 or 2 boxes, so in order to make sure I minimize the destruction here, I find it's best to just do a double jump onto the floating box, breaking it, but negating any possible other breakages. Not long after this, we once again come across the mech suit, and along with it comes more boxes that we can't jump over. Oh, I guess this stack can be jumped over? That's weird. I swear that the last time we had this thing, there were boxes stacked to this same height that I couldn't get over. After this, we have one final chase segment, this time against a massive explosion. I thought the mech suit controls would make this near impossible to get through without breaking something, but turns out it's actually pretty easy. I think they knew the mech suit would make this harder, so slowed down the speed of the chase, which does help make things more doable. We're still not done yet though, as the last little bit of level features this area with a lot of boxes on the floor, and there's no way that the mech suit can clear all of them, so 2 more boxes are needed to be broken. In the end, 29 boxes are broken all up, 4 by us and 25 ghosts on the chase path, bringing us to 151 ghosts and 78 normal boxes broken. Only one level stands between us and Cortex now, level 25, Cortex Vortex, and what a fitting level for this game to go out on, representing the whole thing really well by being not very good. Maybe I'm being a little too hard on this level, it's fine, but I have a serious bone to pick with one thing, these weird electric fences. These things are coloured predominantly orange with gaps where you can see the blue background of the level behind. You know what else is predominantly orange with a lot of blue as well? Crash. So when Crash is standing behind these things, it can be super hard to tell exactly where he is in relation to it, since he blends in so well. This is mainly an issue in the opening segment where there's a bunch of them back to back. They just make it so hard to move Crash around. The camera for this part is also weirdly bad to add to the problem. I'm glad they pulled it back to help make platforming towards the camera easier, but for whatever reason here, it makes Crash look really small on screen and kind of screws with the depth perception. Most of these problems go away completely, or at least ease up as the level moves on, but still, this is probably one of my least favourite openings to a Crash level there is, so I had to mention it. On the topic of boxes though, most of them in this level are pretty easy to avoid. There are 2 big box structures though that are kind of challenging to get past. The first, you need to do a double jump up onto a bouncing box, then jump off over the floating box to land on the other side of the structure. Getting up onto the bouncing box isn't too hard, but a lot of the time when I tried jumping over the floating box, I would land on it, breaking it, so you really need your jump to be almost perfect to get past. The second structure is even harder to get past. Once again, you want to aim for the bouncing box in the middle, but this time a TNT hangs in the air above it, so you'll need to keep a constant forward movement to avoid bonking into it and setting it off. I think with a perfect jump off the bouncing box, you could probably clear the rest of the boxes here, but whenever I tried it, I would always at minimum clip the last box, so unfortunately I have to count it. After this, there's a field of nitros with scientists throwing potions around, which is a real pain to get through, but with good jumping, it is doable, just really nerve-wracking since it is pretty close to the end of the level. Speaking of the end of the level, from here there's nothing really in our way stopping us from getting there. Our total is now at 79 boxes broken. With all the power crystals now collected, all that's left is to once again put a stop to Cortex's evil scheme, so it's onto our final boss fight. This fight is just alright, nowhere near the worst the game has to offer, but still it's pretty mid where Crash bosses are concerned. Crunch has a bunch of buttons he can step on to summon one of the elemental masks to do an attack, with each damage cycle bringing out a new mask and a new attack pattern for Crunch to use. After he's done using his attacks, he gets a little dizzy, giving you a chance to shoot him with the fruit bazooka, after which he gets mad at Cortex and gives him a shove, putting him in range for us to spin him. Rinse and repeat 4 times. The first and most common attack he uses, the rock attack, is a little annoying to avoid. Rocks come crashing down from the sky and we have to weave our way around avoiding them. You can kind of tell where they're going to hit by a dark spot that appears on the ground, but it's pretty hard to see, so I found the best option was to just run around, blindly hoping for the best. For whatever reason though, the rest of the elemental attacks are piss easy to avoid. The ice one can't hit you as long as you're as close as possible to the screen, and even if it does hit you, this one isn't damaging like the rest. For the fire and electric attacks, they can't hit you as long as you're standing on the raised area at the back of the arena, though for the electric attack it can still hit you if you're standing on or too close to one of the electrified bits. Because of this fight really isn't that hard. You might have to try a few times to get lucky avoiding the rock rain, but it's just a matter of time until you come out victorious. For beating Cortex and Crunch, we're awarded our final power-up, which doesn't matter since the game, and by extension, our challenge is over. With Cortex once again defeated, Crash is finally able to have a disco with some dude. Guess it makes sense that this game's ending would be pretty weak. I mean, I get that I didn't collect all of the gems or relics to see the true ending, but I didn't do that in any of the other games either, and at least their endings felt like they wrapped things up. So, can you beat Crash Bandicoot 4, The Wrath of Cortex, without breaking any boxes? Have you been paying attention? No, of course not, nowhere near. In terms of its position in the Crash boxless rankings, this one is by far the worst, having significantly more boxes than all the other Crash games combined, and that's not including the ghosts and theoretical boxes. If you add them, our total is 236 boxes. None of the other games even broke triple digits. I guess this was to be expected. As I mentioned in the beginning, this game isn't nearly as well made as the others, plus there's just way more boxes in every level, so it stands to reason that the numbers would be inflated. Let's just hope that the same isn't true when I get around to the other Crash 4. Wait, other Crash 4s? That doesn't make sense. How could there be 2 Crash 4s? Anyway, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this vid, why not consider giving it a like and subscribing for more like it. Until next time, I've been Katie Cat, this outro was filmed during a cyclone, and thank you for watching.